Hello everybody, today I'm going to show you guys how I do some of my car upholstery. I figured that this piece here would be a good example because it's pretty small and I can get it done pretty fast, but it's also has a number of different panels and things, so there's a lot to learn. This is not a tutorial on how to do sewing or like cutting upholstery. There's 5001 different tutorials online how to do those. Not to say that it's easy or you can learn it in 10 minutes. You know, it takes some practice, especially sewing. But this is not the, really the video for that. This is, assuming you can sew and you can figure out how to cut upholstery to size to make a pattern. I'm just showing you some of the techniques that I do in addition to that. So for this piece here, the first thing I do is I go over and I photograph every kind of nuanced part of the piece. Everything, so you can see like this stitching doesn't go all the way out there. It stops here. Why? I don't know. But take a photo of that. Take a photo of precisely how they did this loop here. For this thing, there's staples here. Take a photo of that. The stitching on this. Take a photo of that. There's this panel here. That stitching that goes across there. I take a photo of that. Take a photo of how all the nails are put in here, because all that's going to come apart, and I need to know exactly how it was done so I can replicate it properly. Aside from that, we basically disassemble the piece in the standard fashion to make our panels. For something that's supposed to be symmetrical, a lot of times I'll use the same panel for both sides. In other words, like this and the panel on the other side should be the same shape. I'll just use one of them and cut both of my new ones to the same shape. Should make it more symmetrical than trying to copy one of these individually. And that's a pretty common trick. The other thing I'll do, you can really only do this if you're not planning on keeping the fabric, but if you're redoing the piece, then why do you need to keep the fabric? As you can see here, there's an index line. So I'll make these lines across the piece. So when I have my my patterns, the original patterns, I can always sort of reassemble them and see what was going on and what was attached to what part. That's very helpful. Another thing I'll do, for example, this, they have ducking here instead of the normal fabric. I'm just going to use the normal fabric. I really don't know why they would use ducking in some of these places. Now, there are some places you do want to use ducking. For example, like under the seat, there's a place where you have metal rods going through, so you have to make a loop. You don't really want to do that with a normal upholstery material because it's really thick. It's not going to loop up very well, whatever. So yes, we'll use ducking there. But for something that's just this tiny flat panel, I would rather just use the same material I'm going to use on the face, and not deal with this. Well, I say that, except I'm going to use leather here. So yeah, I might actually replicate this with just something else, and save a bit of my leather because leather is so expensive. But for just normal broadcloth, it's $20 a yard. Obviously, I'm not using SMS. I'm getting standard sort of stuff. I don't really pay attention to that, but yes, I'll probably do something here. I'm not. Well, I do have ducking. I could put it on there. I just don't want it to look weird if the customer is well, I shouldn't say customer. It's my own car. Oh wait, no, I'm looking at the piece wrong. Hold on. I misspoke. So this is what it looks like when it's closed. This is all broadcloth, the Bedford cord. So yeah, ducking, that's gonna go. That's just gonna be 100% Bedford cord. This top part here is going to be leather. This is the actual armrest part. And this panel is gonna be more Bedford cord. So it'll blend because the rest of the seat back is gonna be Bedford cord. Hopefully that all made sense. So yeah, I'll start taking this apart and show you guys the patterns I come up with. All right, we have our patterns here. Sometimes you'll see interesting things that are only obvious once the thing's taken apart. For example, right behind where they have this thing to pull the armrest down, they have this strip of ducking here. That adds strength to this piece. Probably I should replicate that, because even though leather is plenty strong, this part's going to be leather. Even though leather is plenty strong, it's stretchy. So I'll keep that in mind to put that there. We can see exactly the sewing techniques that were done. For example, here we have the single French. So there was this first seam done, and then they fold the fabric over and sew the second seam on. That's very typical sort of thing, not hard to do at all. And we're going to replicate all of that. On this piece itself here, this is the armrest part. This is called Recoylin Foam. Koylin. Koylon. It's a brand name of the time. A lot of times when you find this stuff, you can actually find the trademark on it if you look closely. I didn't see it on here. So this is good. The part that was UV exposed for who knows how many decades is rock hard. And then the bottom part here, what's funny is this is actually good because this is kind of right next to the seat bottom. However, it's also just like super moldy, obviously. So this is going to have to go. The construction of this itself, we peek in here, there's coil springs wrapped in burlap. That's perfectly good. Got a tacking strip here. Perfectly good. This cloth, whatever this, what do you call this? Like cheesecloth or something. This is attached to the foam. I think it's actually sort of like imbued in the foam. So whenever I replace the foam, which I can actually do, this cover, I took it off with the thing already on, but because I didn't want to like destroy the foam from pressing on it too hard. But how this is designed to be put on is actually they'll just squish this down like that, slide it on, and then tack it in place. So that's how that's going to go back on, and I'll probably put it back on for the time being and come back and replace the foam later. Because why do stuff right now when you can always just procrastinate, right? But you know, I want to test fit it, make sure it looks good with matching my patterns, and then you know we'll go from there with some new foam. I don't even know how thick this is. It looks like, you know, inch and a half or something. Whatever. I'll figure it out later. But just want to show you guys that's where we're at so far. So now I'm going to process these patterns a little bit more. Like these two have to come apart because this is leather, this is broadcloth. Other than that, we're pretty close to start cutting material. Something else interesting when I was taking apart the what do you even call this? The handle, the loop to pull it out. I found they use this piece of vinyl inside to add some strength. Actually, a very nice sample of trim code 11 vinyl for 55. You know, obviously just a piece of scrap that they had lying around. I'm not going to duplicate that because I'm making this out of leather this time. It'll be perfectly strong. But if you're going to make it out of cloth, some sort of thin cloth like this, you would need to do that. If you're going to use like Bedford cord or upholstery, like upholstery grade cloth, you probably wouldn't need to do that. Whatever, it depends. All right, guys, here's one of my patterns. This stuff can be a little difficult to pattern out. Now for this one, I think these guys, the originals, I think use a 3/8 border, which I'm going to use with my vinyl. So that's perfectly fine. I'm just basically going to trace around their original pattern here. The only time it looks like it goes farther than that is right here. Of course, this extra also, but this isn't really sewn. That's just extra material. But yeah, you do have to be careful to get all the curves and everything right. It's whatever. I just follow whatever they were doing. I just think that's best. Now for the front and back panels and things, the material stretches a little bit, but they're supposed to be rectangular. So I cut those rectangular. I cut these in this whatever obese beluga whale shape it is, you know, like the eye would be here. That's like the tiny, like the tail, you know, like, I don't know. Yeah. Or like a really short submarine. Anyway, As you can see, of course, there's material missing here, so I had to kind of guesstimate based on the feel of the fabric how that curve goes. It really should be symmetrical to that top curve, but whatever. I mean, trying to pattern stuff that's worn out is a whole skill in and of itself. So I just want to show you guys kind of what I'm doing here. My preferred method to mark these is I'll actually just use a Sharpie on the facing side of the material. So the thing is, because it's on the border here, you're never going to see that. My upholstery procedure would never do that. He always turns the material face down and uses chalk on the back, but not me. All right, guys, so now we have our trim cover done. Now I know I'm obviously skipping a couple steps here, but this is very typical upholstery and sewing practice. That doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's obvious, but there's plenty of places you can learn either virtually or in-person class how to cut and sew, is what that's called, like a cut and sew shop, pattern, cut, sew. So this is a very typical practice, and I did all the exact same stitching as it was originally. We just have a single stitch here, and then on the front here. Now on the front, I did it backwards on purpose, just because I think it looks better this way. This is a single French. It's supposed to be, this is the single French, and this thing like tucks under there. But when this gets folded up, it's gonna lay like that anyway, and it'll be a perfectly good handle. So I'm not concerned with that. That's what I wanted to do. But as you can see, it's not completely attached yet. I also need to make my back panel here because I'm going to be replacing the foam in here. The foam in this is pretty shot. Now this side is okay, but if we flip it over, the exposed side, this stuff is just getting hard. It's moldy. I'll take the trim cover back off and show you. But I'll show you what we'll do for that. Obviously, my original plan was just to get new foam, but the Michaels didn't have stiff enough foam, and the back side of it is still good, so I could tell how stiff it's supposed to be. All the foam they had was way too soft. So what I'm going to do is take cotton and replace the foam with cotton and put some ducking over that to hold the cotton in place while I can slide the trim cover back on. That should work pretty well, so I'll show you guys that. You guys know that I like to reuse and repair everything possible original on these cars, but that doesn't really extend to upholstery. For stuff like this, it's moldy there, it's UV damaged here. Nothing better than to get all this old junk out of here and replace it with fresh new material. So this is hog ringed on. Just gonna clip, well, you really just tear through this here. Clip those or tear the fabric. And I'm gonna remove this here. As before, we want to note the original construction. So we have these. These are actually hog ringed onto the spring coils in the middle here. And we have this, it's tucked in. Now we're not gonna even replace this with the exact same thing, but we want to at least have a good idea. And then there's these two hog rings here that wire onto this Z spring. So this foam is actually adhered on to the armrest side. In other words, the rear side that, you know, this is what folds down. You actually rest your elbow on. So I'm scraping it off with a wood chisel. It's going pretty well. I was thinking about trying to just reuse this part, but I figure might as well replace the whole thing, and I can always put this back on if I want. Obviously, I already trimmed it to where the actual nice border of the foam is. All right, guys, check this out. I got this cotton installed here. This is actually softer than the original foam, but the seat's going to be made out of cotton as well, so shouldn't be too big of a deal. And I intentionally left it sort of overstuffed, so hopefully when I get the trim cover on, it'll look normal and it'll kind of fill out the trim cover. All right, guys, check this out. This is looking sweet. So this is the facing side, and then you have both of the sides here. I didn't even have to use the heat gun on these. They just turned out really well. And then, so the thing is that
You know, when the armrest is in the seat, it's like that. When you pull it down here, I added I don't even know what you call this panel. So this gets hog ringed to the seat itself. So it ends up being like held up like that so that you don't see behind the seat. So I have this huge leather armrest here. This turned out really well. Very few, wrinkles or anything. Then I got the panel here. There's this spring, of course, you can see that holds it in. Yes, I did use tons of staples from the staple gun. Sue me. It's a lot easier than using the upholstery tacks and trying to just hammer in all these tiny tacks. I don't even want to deal with that. Literally nobody's ever going to see this. So yes, even though it looks sloppy, there is a method to my madness, and it's all done properly there. Like with these here, they don't have to be completely even. The tacking wasn't even from the factory. What matters is you look down here and that seam looks completely straight and there's no gaps. Things like that, right? So yeah, as you can tell, this is basically like when the armrest is down, this is basically what is the border between, what I'm trying to say. This is where the front of the seat back lines up. So this thing tips back at like more than a 90-degree angle, pretty much, and it basically lines up there. So none of that's ever going to be visible. But yeah, it feels really good. I mean, this is 100% real top grain leather. We got the finger strap thing here. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It just looks really good, in my opinion. The one things I did is I added a little extra cotton up in these corners, which was really quite the pain because you can only add it when the thing's already all the way on. So I was, obviously before I stapled it, I was pressing this down. This has springs in it like I was showing before. And I was able to tuck my arm all the way in and shove the cotton up here. Yes, that was pretty tight fit. Fortunately, I'm still fairly skinny. And then the only other place I needed to cotton was right here. I know there's that sort of like pinch there it's basically on the other side. Not much I can really do about that. But yeah, I did add a slight amount of cotton here so that this wasn't baggy. As you can see, the material kind of pulls in. So there's cotton right in front of this to keep it from being too baggy. Other than that, I mean, it's not like it's a problem when you see it. But other than that, it's completely, as I showed in the previous section of the video, with the like the cotton with the ducking on top for the padding there. To me, it feels pretty good. It is fairly soft, so if you poke at it like this, you'll hit the bottom. But I don't think it's too obvious. The other thing with this is you can see this armrest is actually not that tall. So you're either like just barely going to be resting your arm on it, or if you're small enough to like actually be able to completely rest your arm and put weight on this, you're pretty much, you'd be like 4.5 feet tall or something. That'd be like a child. So how much is that person going to weigh? So this doesn't have to be like ultra stiff. So I think that's perfectly fine. And then as for the front, this feels much like a normal couch cushion. Or I guess we'll do the back cushion there, right? So that feels 100% normal. It's never going to feel quite right sitting literally right in front of the armrest, but it should feel pretty comfortable. Shouldn't really be too much worry there. Anyway, guys, real happy with how this turned out. Just wanted to show you kind of my process. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you later.